In the mind of a beginner, there are 1,000 options. In the mind of an expert, there is but one.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters Podcast, the ultimate resource for ambitious, hardworking school owners that want to get their business and their life to the next level. My name is Dave Kovar. I'm a lifetime martial artist, business owner, speaker, and author. My goal is to empower listeners with the knowledge and the tools they need to break through barriers and really get their business and their life to the next level. Thanks for watching and enjoy.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kovar, and with me today is the General Manager of Kovar Systems, Vincent Bardini. How are you today, sir?
Doing great, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. As you see us, we're in different locations. Actually, we're in the same building, if the truth is known. But for the camera stuff, it just works better to do this. And we just got done. We were just out there grappling about 2 hours ago. Your skills are improving all the time, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I have a good teacher.
Yeah, well, that's Mr. Wilson, just so we're clear, everybody. Yeah, it's one of those things that Mr. Bardini is a purple belt now, and he's just been showing up to class consistently. And what happens when you show up to class consistently? You get better. Yep. Yeah, fun stuff. Well, hey, today I wanted to specifically talk about avoiding burnout. Let me kind of set this up. There was a gentleman that I used to know, and he had a school in Southern California, and I've lost touch with him. But in the 90s, he had opened up this amazing facility. It was when, up until then, most people didn't even have mats down yet. We had a padded carpet. Mats didn't really start coming into vogue as a really common. They were out there, but most schools didn't have them. It was carpet or padded carpet, right? And there was still a lot of hardwood floors around there. And anyway, he had, that one of the first schools that he had a line of hanging bags, and the graphics and they were amazing, and he had beautiful mats, and it was just this amazing school. He was also incredibly charismatic, incredibly hardworking, and an incredibly good martial artist. So what do you get when you get the right person at the right place at the right time with a good product? You get results. The guy just absolutely, his school just took off and it was booming. And I kind of lost track with him. And then what would happen is I'd see him around at the Super Show every now and then. And over the course of a decade, maybe a little longer, 15 years ago, I'd see him every 2 or 3 years, and kind of his spark and his light just kind of became a little dimmer. And about 5 years ago, I was in Southern California to do an instructor college, and I was in the neighborhood. So I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can I drop by and say hi?" And I showed up at his school, and it just broke my heart. It was going from this vibrant, amazingly beautiful cutting edge school to this beaten down, run down. It was the same mats. I think it was probably still the same paint and same bags that it was 25 years ago. And he was clearly just kind of burned out. He was struggling to keep his school open. And kind of the interesting thing, so that's the setup. We don't want to be that guy, right? So the key thing is, what can we do to we're in this business. How can we keep our passion strong? And so I'm just going to, you work with clients every day, so you see this a lot. You give me some feedback. I'm a school owner. What kind of things can I do to avoid getting burned out?
I think one of the biggest pieces is maintaining your own personal martial arts training. That's why you started this business. And if you're not continuing to train, you're kind of standing still. So a lot of the most successful school owners that I see, some of them are still teaching classes, and by all means, if that's what they want to do, they can do that. But otherwise, they're still pursuing their own personal martial arts journey, whether it's going into a different style for personal growth or just furthering their growth in their own particular style. I think that's probably the number one piece for avoiding burnout.
I think, man, I'll tell you, I think it's so important. And as you age, you can't always do the same stuff, right? But you can always do something. And of course, you've heard this 1,000 times, and you've probably said it hundreds of times. And martial arts first, teaching second, business third. And you're like you might not train like you did when you're 25, but there's an X factor that happens when you're training that it makes you more passionate about teaching. Here's an example. Like, let's say I go to a weekend seminar and I learn some really cool moves. I show up on Monday to teach class. Everything about that class is better. Even the way I bow in the class, the way I warm up the class, because in my mind I go, man, I got this really cool, curriculum to teach. And to this day, like I can wing a class. I've taught long enough to where I don't necessarily have to plan a class. I can usually wing it and it's okay. But to this day, if I plan a class, it's better. The whole thing is better. Everything about it. And so, and half the job of being a good teacher. So you start with a good passion for martial arts. That's half the job of being a good teacher. And then, of course, a big chunk of being a successful business is having a great product, and that is having a good teacher. So really, I think you nailed it. And you also mentioned, hey man, you can train in a different style to have that white belt mindset, or you can just master your craft. And there's nothing, I don't know that there's a right way to do that. Like, who am I to tell someone else what their martial arts journey should be? But the deal is when you're sweating on the mat, it keeps it from just being, widgets that we're selling. It keeps it real and common and combined.
Yeah.
Um, what else do
I
you
want to
hear
touch,
when you're out there? Go ahead.
well, I want to touch base. You mentioned something about that white belt mindset, the beginner's mindset. It reminds me, we had a client of ours was wanting to take up a new sport, and he went out, and I think it was with a couple teammates, and he went out. He had never done this sport before. He wanted to try out golf and learn how to do it, so he took some lessons, and he realized this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And he's an exceptional athlete, high level, martial arts practitioner, and he's like, this is a lot more difficult than I thought. And then for what it's worth, in his mind, something clicked. And he's like, this is probably what all of my students are experiencing right now when they first step up. And so I think it's really important, whether it's throwing yourself into another martial arts to get that beginner's mindset, or even into just a new activity in general. That's going to, pay off in dividends for how you teach your students in their experience when they first start their journey.
I love it. Every time I do an instructor boot camp, what I do is I always a part of that is I teach some curriculum, and I usually do. What I'll do is I'll have kind of an outline of my curriculum that I'm going to do for this year and all my events, because otherwise it's hard to remember what I taught at this. I was out here last year. What did we do? I want to teach something different, but it usually has to do with clinch stuff, because that's where most people are kind of the weakest. But I always try to make it something that very few people in the room have ever done, and we use that very example. Like, how many guys, had the light bulb go on, you were confused and had the light bulb go on. Well, that's what your students feel like, so I think it's a great point. And of course, the phrase is Shoshin, and Shoshin roughly translated means beginner's mind. And the definition: in the mind of a beginner, there are 1,000 options. In the mind of an expert, there is but one. And I think also this applies, to the beginner's mind is not just as a teacher, but it's keeping that excitement about what we do strong. So there's three primary types of motivation, and there's desperation, and there's inspiration, and there's purpose. And we've all been motivated by desperation. I can't tell you how many times in my career where it's like, oh man, how am I going to pay the rent? Well, guess what? You're desperate, you figure it out. Right. But the challenge with being desperate is it's temporary. And then the flip side of that is inspiration. That's where I went to an event, a seminar, I read a book, I'm inspired, which is, by the way, inspiration is way better than desperation, but it also tends to be temporary. And purpose, that will sustain you, right? And so having a real clear purpose helps out. And I know for me, when it comes to uh, resisting burnout, and this is something that I learned from Sensei Benny the Jet Urquidez, and that is that, hey man, when you show up to your school, first thing you do, and when you stick the key in the door, is you take a moment and you remember how grateful you are to be doing this as a career. And something I do when I go into school, I even did it this morning, is I walk in and I'll wander through the school. If I'm in a hurry, I don't spend as much time, but if I have 5 minutes, I'll go into every room and I'll just try to take it in, and I'll try to remember experiences that have happened. Because when I do this, when I finally sit down at my desk, my purpose is stronger. I'm clearer about what I'm in, what it is that I'm doing and why. And that, also helps with the burnout resistance.
And I love doing this, and you taught this concept to me, a while ago, and I've kind of adapted it for some personal use at home too. Just being grateful for where we are, but every day, when we tie on the belt, right, we're in that mindset. We're here. We're present focused. We're here for our students. But I took that same mindset, and I use the drive home to decompress a little bit, from work and everything. But as soon as that key enters the door, it's like, you know what? It's father mode now. And I think it's just such a great concept that not a lot of people use in other aspects of their life too, which I think can, strengthen their relationships elsewhere. And when you have strong relationships and people supporting you, and everyone's, operating at not full capacity, but operating in a green zone, right? Then
Yeah,
life just in
totally.
general tends to be better.
I'll tell you what, like, and your kids are young right now, and it's so important that you do that, because how many times have I And I still do it, right? I forget to bow into my home, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like I don't all, but I remember one time I'm walking with my daughter, Melissa, who was about 9 years old, and in my head, I'm dealing with some work issue, and we're at Ansel Hoffman Park, and it's this gorgeous day, and she's telling me about her day, and she's talking a mile a minute, and I'm only half paying attention, and she looks over at me, she steps in front of me, she puts her hand out, and she goes, Dad, in the moment at your best, which is of course our tagline to Satori, right? You're not even paying. It's like busted. Yeah, yeah. So, but it's so true that yeah, the value of a ritual. So to me, a ritual is a habit fused with positive intention. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Uh, and sometimes to switch gears. And by the way, the best thing you can do for your career is when you're not there to be disengaged, because that allows you to be fresh when you get back, right? And so if you because you've always like if you never shut it off, you're going to reach task saturation a lot sooner. There's one of my favorite quotes is wherever you are, be there, right? And we teach the kids, hey, when you're in soccer practice, what should you be talking about? Soccer. When you're in martial arts class, what should you be thinking about? Martial arts. When you're playing with your friends, but in other words, you're trying to stay present focused as possible. Um,
Mhm.
a couple other things that I find that have been really helpful through the years to avoid burnout, and it has to do with purpose, is that to keep that purpose strong, there's several things that I'll do. One of them is remember past successes, right? And what I'm referring to specifically as an instructor is I'm helping out at one of the schools every now and then. It's nice to get on the mats and see what's going on. And there's a few kids that I'm getting to know a little bit when I go out there, and they're special needs kids. And I've seen, and one of them I'm thinking of particularly, he's kind of a hard kid to like. But over the last few months, I've actually seen him improve dramatically. And it's like, and I've learned to like, okay, he's a great kid. He's just got some, he's making progress. And in order for him to benefit, I got to be at my best, and I got to kind of be patient and with him and enthusiastic with him, all things that we know to do. And when I do that, I remember, my purpose is he's here, his family here, bring him here because he needs this, right? And when I remember that, and I'm present, focused, and I'm positive, it's amazing the difference as far as how much more fun I have, and chances are he's having that same amount, is more fun as well.
Mhm. And what he's going to remember too is the effort that you put in. It's uh, when I first came back, everyone was asking me, Vincent, why'd you come back? And it's just such a great atmosphere. It's because I liked being here and I liked the way I felt when I was on the mat training. And I look back and I wish I hadn't taken that long gap because things would have been a little bit different. But I'm here now, and the story that I would use, I think I may have told you this, but what got me really excited about going into class was getting picked to be the uke. So, when I was younger, we were just starting to introduce Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into the curriculum. So I think it was just for black belts. Mr. Caswell was teaching us tumbling combo, and so that was fun. But I was always excited to be the uke and get choked out by Hanshi Kovar. It's like, yes, I got choked out. I was the one that got picked. But that's what I was looking for with that relationship. And then everyone else is looking for something a little bit different. But every day that we show up, we're constantly going to be putting something in that good bucket for them, keeping their foot in
Yeah,
the door, keeping them motivated. That little extra thing that you did today could be the reason that they train for you for another 5 or 10 years, or it could be the
such a
difference between a good day and a bad day for them.
100%. It's funny. In case you guys are wondering, yeah, Mr. Bardini only took like 15 years off. It was something like that. A couple other things when resisting burnout. There's a quote that finish my sentence. If you want something done right, you have to.
Do it yourself.
That's very, very dangerous thinking. You know what I'm saying? It's like how many times does that pop into people's head? And that was really my friend in Southern California that got burned out. I didn't really quite finish the story. The reason why it happened is because he never spent time to train his staff. He was such a charismatic teacher, and he'd throw somebody on the floor and they failed in comparison. So he just went through instructors. He never spent the time. He planted the seed, but expected to blossom way too soon. And he didn't really have a formal training method. And so kind of the other thing to remember is if you want to avoid burnout is you can't be teaching every class. You've got to make sure that you train your team. And that takes time. And the issue most people face is they need help like right now. I need help now. Who can help me? And what they aren't seeing is people in their class that are a couple years away from being great assistants. Whatever you have to deal with now, great, you deal with, but you should be planting seeds now that because there's some of them are going to bloom later on. And if we can do that, that makes an incredibly big difference. So another thing for avoiding burnout is good instructors training.
You want to know something that's really humbling about if you want something done right, do it yourself, is when you have children and you're teaching them how to clean their room and make their bed. It's easy to go in and make it for them, but really, you're doing them a disservice. Yes, it's not going to look great the first few times that they do it, but each time it's going to get a little bit better and a little bit better. And for those people that have children, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's the same concept with, I think, with instructors as well. Yes, they're going to fumble. They might, do a move incorrectly, hopefully not incorrectly, but maybe miss a key piece when they're demonstrating the move. Maybe they're learning how to use their instructor voice on the map, but you got to let them fumble a little bit and then provide that feedback for them so that they can continue to grow.
Yeah, love it. Love it. It's really good. So a couple of things that I wrote down I wanted to cover when it comes to avoiding burnout. And so we talked about remember past successes. Along that lines is thank you notes. I got a thank you note last week from the parents of a gentleman who recently had an MMA match. You may know who I'm talking about. And
Mhm.
I have no reason. It was a thank you note for taking this person into our school and letting him train here and being so, and it was really cool. It was like unsolicited, and it was like,
Yeah.
wow, that was powerful. And most of martial arts school instructors and owners have a stack of either emails and or cards, thank you cards. And I can't tell you how many times that I've pulled those out. I've got a few I've looked at a bunch of times because they remind me about what's most important and what it is that I do. And
Mhm.
the other thing that I think sometimes it's super important to avoiding burnout. It's such a basic health thing. Is that what we do? We got to put ourselves out there. And if you're teaching a back-to-back classes, it uses a lot of energy. And what goes up must come down. And I think what's important is that we have to balance out our schedule with downtime, and that's is specifically getting enough sleep. And besides that, rest and or quiet contemplation moments every day. I know for me, it's no secret that I take a nap every day after lunch. I don't care where I'm in. I could be on a plane. I'm gonna, or in an airport. I'm gonna go to the corner. I'm gonna take a 10-minute nap. But for me, that's my recharge. It really helps me kind of get back on track. So the importance of making sure that you take good care of yourself. And one last thing that I would a couple things is that I'm sure you felt it. There's life doesn't go straight up. There's the good days and there's
Not at
bad
all.
days,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And there's days when you wake up feeling like, holy moly, how did I get so lucky? And other days you're going, man, how am I going to get through the day? And it happens to all of us.
Mhm.
But that there's cycles in life. And when you're going through a low spot, it's like, you know what? Right now, this kind of sucks, but if I keep getting up and doing what when I can, I'm going to get through it. And sometimes we forget that.
Absolutely. And there's that mindset that, I'm sure everyone's heard that, every day you get up and you make your bed, and whether the day is good or bad, you come home to a made bed and you've done at least one thing right that day.
Man, I love it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the concept of remembering that wisdom comes from experience remembered. And if we can simply, when we're having those down days, if we can try to learn from them, what did I do? How can I be better? Because really, alls we need is momentum. We're never going to, all right, boom, I figured it out. I'm never get burned out again. Everything is great.
Mhm.
That's before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. We're always going to be a work in progress. But if we can just, remember from experiences and just focus on improvements, good stuff will happen. And then one last comment, and I'm going to leave you with to close this out, man. The importance of when you get thrown a loop, and it's going to happen, all the time. How quickly can you get back on track? There's a concept in discipline called reactive discipline. Now, usually when you think of discipline, we think of structural discipline. When I think, I think about how, let's take Mr. Chamberlain, the CEO of our company. There's no one on the planet that's more disciplined than Dave Chamberlain, right? I mean, like man, structure, detail, follow through. He's there. And that's it, and I'm pretty disciplined in certain areas of my life as well. And that's structural discipline. Now, something, by the way, Mr. Chamberlain's also good at the second kind I'm going to talk about, and that is reactive discipline. And reactive discipline is you get thrown a loop, boom. How quickly can you get back on track? You know what I'm saying? And a lot of that has to do with our ability to be present, focused, and wow, man, realizing that there's a challenge going on here, and taking a moment, taking a breath and thinking, you know what, this is bad, but I'm going to get through this. I'm not sure how. Let me regain my focus, because what happens is when you get thrown for a loop, we got to remember that logic and emotion are like oil and water. They don't mix. And when I become emotional about something, that doesn't help me. That throws me off. But if I can get my logic back, so to speak, I'm going to be able to kind of think my way through the process. So what I would encourage people to do is use everyday adversity as a way to develop this. So you're stuck at a red light, you're late. That's when you practice being calm. You're supposed to. I just had an incident where I was sharing before we turned the podcast on that I rebooked my tickets wrong, and now I have to rebook it again. Right? It's like, well, this is my chance to take a breath and just let it go, because being upset about it doesn't change anything. It only throws me off my game. So you take little things like that aren't that important, and you practice. And that way, when bigger things really hit you, you're more likely to be able to really work on that reactive discipline, which is going to help you minimize your burnout.
Yeah. And I love that you put in there those little pieces, because that's exactly what I was thinking is, if you start to throw yourself in some uncomfortable scenarios, right, that's going to kind of peak that stress level for you. But as you start to experience it more, just like you're getting reps on, a triangle in jujitsu, right? You get better at handling it, and better and better and better. And now when you start to experience those, you already have that built-in wisdom there. And so now, instead of these big spikes in your stress level, is these more little speed bumps. And now you're sitting at more of an even keel, as opposed to these big volatile ups and downs here.
Yep, totally. Good deal. All right. Well, man, I appreciate you chiming in a little bit here. And for those of you guys that are out there resisting burnout, man, take good care of yourself. Eat right, exercise, get enough rest, develop a team, make sure your purpose is clear. Why are you doing what you're doing? And then make sure that at the end of the day, you see the impact that you're having, because when you see the impact that you're having, what that'll do is that really builds your purpose. And it's hard to be convincing when you're not convinced. Meaning, if you're not passionate about what you do, everybody around you is going to feel it, and it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. So there's my thoughts. Any closing thoughts?
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully
right.
I can be on again sometime, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being on.
Thank you for tuning in today to our podcast. I hope you found it valuable and inspirational. To stay connected, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a 5-star review. And we really sincerely would appreciate some feedback. Your feedback helps us to create high-quality content that will help others in the future. If you'd like to follow me, you can go to Dave Kovar on Facebook or Haunchie Dave Kovar on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on next episode.